Hello Internet, welcome back to the experimental Cataclysm. If you're new here, this is the show where we talk about updates that have come to the experimental version of Cataclysm over the last couple of weeks. We'll talk about bug fixes and major content updates, things like that. Speaking of bug fixes, we did have an issue over the last couple of weeks where the Firewood Source, both the construction menu item that you could create to use a firewood pile as a source for your fire, as well as the zone manager version of that same exact function were broken. So your fires were not automatically feeding themselves, which meant as you crafted, as you read, things like that, the fire would just go out on its own. As far as I know, this has been fixed. It was a bug. I believe WAP Caplet was the one who fixed it. I don't have that in front of me, but as far as I know, that has been fixed, so you should be able to update, which is really good news for people like me who spend 90% of the game using fires as a light source. So yeah, that should be fixed, and you should feel free updating. If for some reason you don't want to update, or maybe it's still broken, you should use logs instead of like splintered wood and stuff, because logs will give you the longest burn time. Now let's get into the new stuff. First, from Bombastic Slacks, we got egg cartons. This is a really good change, simple change that has made it to where fridges that usually spawn. So previously, if you found a fridge, and this was very, very common in basically every house you would go to, you would find a stack of single eggs in the fridge. Not only were they not in a container, but they don't stack with each other. So you would just at the bottom of the list have like 8 to 12 eggs floating there in the fridge, and that was really bad and annoying, and that has been changed because Bombastic Slacks has added a container specifically for eggs. It makes perfect sense. An egg carton obviously is in 90% of fridges, at least here in the US. Very common thing to find, and it's a very simple change that takes care of that problem. So yeah, very simple, very straightforward, but super nice to not have those long lists of eggs anymore. It's funny, I would not even have considered adding a container item for them, but that is clearly the easiest and most straightforward solution. So it's nice to see that. Now, all we need to do is get someone to go through and audit fridge item groups a little bit and make them stop spawning 90% lactose intolerant foods. That would be great if someone could do that. Not every house in America has a fridge full of milk, and that's a little too common. And we would like to see some regular food items spawning a little bit more rather than just all this butter and cheese that you normally find. Anyway, not to complain, but anyway, so that's a nice little change. Very simple, very straightforward, but will make that menu look a lot nicer when you're looting a fridge. Next, from the Royal Assassin, we have tastier carrots and roasted carrots. So this is basically, it adds a recipe for roasted carrots, which did not exist previously. So now you'll have something to do with your carrots instead of eating them raw. Who likes raw carrots anyway? A roasted carrot is much better than the raw version, so that is nice. And it addressed some small stuff, like it changed the calories, the weight of raw carrots and things like that. Pretty straightforward, but I like carrots, so I thought I would mention it. It's really not anything super impactful on gameplay, but yeah, I like it. So yes, wanted to shout that out. Next, from Curse Twist, we got a taco truck and item groups associated with a taco truck. I like this. I'm a big fan of food trucks in real life, and we really didn't have that many. We had an ice cream truck, and we had there was another vehicle that was for food, but I don't remember what they were. And then we had like the little food carts in the shopping mall and places like that. Sorry, by the way, it's still a lot of snow here, so there are people out shoveling and things like that. So yes, we've added a taco truck. Pretty straightforward. It looks like they just changed some things with the ice cream truck, which is perfectly fine. And it adds, item groups that are appropriate for a taco truck. So I really like this. It looks like they have a lot of nachos. They have a lot of raw materials that would go into making tacos and things like that. And then we have some actual taco items as well. So I really like this. Curse Twist does a lot of like map gen stuff. I guess they are also doing some vehicle work. And really, I just like more diversity in vehicles. The vehicles are one of the things that gets updated the least in my experience, because we generally use pretty general terms for our vehicles. We'll say like electric, solar vehicle or electric sports car, that kind of thing. And they're generic, so we don't have a lot of like super diversity because they're not very specific vehicles. So something like a taco truck, I like that. I like having that added to the game. And who doesn't like tacos? If you don't like tacos, you shouldn't be here. Next, from Pupsy Mupsy, you probably have noticed this. We have vehicle back seats that have been added to the game. Now, as of the last time I played, there was no tile for back seats, which led to a lot of tile sets being broken regarding this, because they didn't use looks like, I guess, in their entry. So it just looked like, I think hashtags or pound signs are what the sprites actually are. And here they've made a mock-up of what they hope the tile set will look like, you know, just kind of their own interpretation of what that will look like. I don't understand why this was really necessary. I do understand that back seats tend to be different from front seats. Like obviously, so I drive a little sedan. My front seats are individual seats, whereas my back seat is actually like 3 people could fit in the seat, and it's one connected seat that goes in the back of my car. I think adding that to the game would be excellent. The problem is they're still treated as modular. So when you install a back seat, it is still a single tile item, right? If we could make it to where the entire seat takes up the whole back and they become conjoined so that when you remove the item, it removes the entire back seat, I would think that would be fine. But because they're treated as modular, there really is no difference between a front seat and a back seat. In fact, they have identical stats, if I recall correctly, and they disassemble for the same materials. So why would I ever install a back seat, really? I guess once the tile sets do make it to where they actually connect like this, sprite-wise, then I guess for aesthetic reasons, I might put a back seat in my vehicle. I don't see a huge point to this. It just seems like my interpretation, so probably people aren't going to like this. My interpretation was that they just broke a bunch of tile sets for no reason. That's my interpretation. I know people will disagree with me. I'm sure someone will say, yeah, and from realism perspective, obviously back seats exist. Like I said, it just seemed like such a weird thing. I just don't, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I don't understand why this is valuable, but to me, it's just an identical seat that goes in the back of the car. So I don't really understand that at the moment. If we were able to conjoin these, multi-tile vehicle parts into one like larger part, I think it would be, I would have no problem with it. But because they're individual modular parts that are identical to front seats, I don't get the point of this at all. But I wanted to shout it out because it did break a lot of tile sets, and you probably noticed a lot of, not having sprites in the back of your vehicle. I don't think there's anything really wrong with it. I just don't get why it was added so much. So, yeah, I feel mean, but let's move on. Next, from HJK321, we have New England Foods, or specifically New England Foods, not New England Foods. And this just adds a variety of foods that are, I guess, common in New England or like state dishes, things like that. I'm sure that we already had clam chowder, obviously is a very common thing from up that direction. But we also got things now like stuffed clams and crab cakes. Apparently there is no crab in the game, so this is just a food item that you will find in the world, things like that. But some of these are craftable. If we want to look here, maybe we can quickly see which ones are craftable. Let's find ourselves a crafting recipe here. Yeah, I don't know either if there are clams in the game. I see frozen lemonade. No, that's not a recipe. Looking for recipes. Also, these hot dogs, I guess, is a thing up there. It just sounded like a chili dog to me. Like it's just a hot dog with ground up meat and onions. Sounds like chili dog to me, but maybe I'm not from New England, so maybe I don't know. Here's the crab cake. Looks like fried fish. Stuffed clams. Yeah, I'm curious. I did not think we had clams in the game, which would make those craftable. So here we have a recipe for the frozen lemonade. I guess, we're making it from a lemon. See, now I'm confused. This requires lemonade as a component, but also lemons itself. And then we need to muddle the lemons, I guess. It's interesting. Here we have the stuffed clams recipe. It does use canned clams. That's interesting. So I guess we have cans of clams, but we probably don't have harvestable clams from like the ocean. I mean, we don't really have an ocean, but And it looks like the hot dog is also craftable. So only a few are craftable. Some of them are not. Here are the oyster crackers. Pretty simple and straightforward. I didn't think of oyster crackers when I saw this PR listed, but they are a pretty common thing, I guess. And they are seafood. You know, that kind of... New England is known for clams and crabs and things like that. So that's fine. So yeah, interesting stuff. Just added some more food to the game. I really like having more food diversity. You really do get in the habit of seeing the exact same food items over and over and over in Cataclysm. So any variety there is nice. And I'm not someone who really cooks a lot in the game, but I'm generally a proponent that if you add a food to the game, you should try to add a recipe for that food. So I kind of like that a lot of these got added. Yeah, just wanted to shout that out. Now, our next change concerns a new NPC, so there are going to be some amount of spoilers for this. I haven't looked at it super in detail to like really find out what the quests are about or anything like that, but we are going to be revealing, I'm going to be revealing the location of this NPC. So if that's something you want to avoid, go ahead and check the timeline of this video. If you hover over the video, you can jump ahead to the next thing, but we are going to cover some spoilers. So that's all the warning you get. Okay, so we got a new NPC. This is from LJ Kozo, I guess. And I have no idea how to say this character's name. I'm going to say Pizza Aioli. Pizza Aioli. Pizza Iolo. And this NPC will spawn in a restaurant, specifically with a 50% probability. Now, I don't know if that means there's a 50% chance regardless of the restaurant. So there are multiple layouts for the restaurant. I don't know if it's a 50% probability. I guess we can look through, but I really don't want to do this on camera because no one will want to watch this. So it looks like at least in one place the chunk is spawned. And I'm not really seeing... I don't know how many of those that chunk was added to. Basically, the chunk will contain just the NPC, so it's very easy to place that NPC specifically. And I'm only seeing that listed in one area of this particular JSON. So it looks like there's a layout that has a 50% chance to spawn. Actually, 5. Okay, it doesn't matter. But regardless of that, there's a new NPC that can spawn in a restaurant. This NPC can be recruited after you complete his quest line. I'm not going to spoil the quests. I haven't looked at what they are exactly. You know, we did just flip through the NPC dialogue while we were looking at the changed files, but I didn't really pay much attention to it. And yeah, just any NPC that gets added to the game I find is generally beneficial. We have a lot of like the random NPCs that can spawn, and there's a lot of diversity in that area, but the real interesting stuff comes from the NPCs that are specific to certain locations. You know, the ones that people think iconically, you know, obviously like Dino Dave is one that stands out to people. The Bone Seer, things like that. Those are some of the most unique characters in Cataclysm. I occasionally get comments where people will complain about having NPCs that are static in the apocalypse. They say, oh, you know, Cataclysm's not really about that. But I don't see a problem with having static NPCs, especially when they tell stories or are themselves unique and engaging characters. So, yeah, to me, this is a solid change. I'm always excited to see new NPCs, as well as new missions added to the game, because we don't have a ton of mission diversity. So for me, this is a win, you know, even though I don't play with NPCs. But I'm sure people will interpret that however they want to interpret that. So keep an eye out next time you're at a restaurant. Have a look out for Pizza Aiolo is how I'm going to say that. Hopefully that's not offending any particular group of people, but moving on. Next, from Moxian, we have a reformat of the bandage usage window. So this is just a little bit of a UI type change. It's actually not that significant. So here we can see the list from before, or rather, this is what the window would look like before. This is them applying a bandage. This is them applying disinfectant. So you can have a look at these if you wish. This is what it looked like previously, and this is what it looks like now. It's actually a pretty minor change. It basically just gets rid of some of the description surrounding the bleed effect that you're currently dealing with, and it just makes everything a little bit more compact. So here we can see this you'll get used to it very quickly. It's really not that significant of a change. It just makes it a little less busy. I don't really have any strong feelings about this. I think that in general our UI is pretty bad. The pop-up windows in Cataclysm are They limit a lot of things, I think, and they make the game a little bit harder to navigate, but I don't have any real suggestion on how to make them better. So whenever I see someone take the time to address a UI problem or expand a menu or something like that, it's generally good news in my opinion. You can see it's more compact. There's just less text, frankly, is what I see when I look at this. Because to me, this doesn't make a huge difference, but is an overall improvement. So I want to shout that out because it does change the way the game looks, and that's something you're probably going to notice. So, moving on. Next, from Kevin. This is one of the bigger changes we need to talk about. So Kevin basically fixed clothing protection values. So essentially, to boil this down, clothing previously had a minimum of 1 protection value. So if you were wearing a t-shirt, it had a minimum value of 1 protection. In fact, let me open the game. We'll have a look at some of these. So here we are in game. Sorry about it not being scaled up. I usually scale things up when I do this. So let's have a look at our underpants. So our panties here. I only chose this because this is one of the items I know has not been changed. So this is the way it used to look. Previously in the game, clothing had a minimum value of 1. So the minimum any clothing item could have was 1 protection if it had any protection at all. So something like a pair of underpants actually gave you 1 protection from bash and cut and from bullets, which is silly, but okay. So that is how it was previously. So it was really easy to just stack up layers of basic clothing and get some amount of protection out of them. Kevin has gone in and changed it so that instead of being, I think it went from an integer to a float. If you're a coder, I don't know, don't hate me. But it basically went from a whole number to where it now allows for decimal places. So if we have a look at our cargo shorts, you'll see that our cargo shorts no longer have a minimum protection of 1, but in fact have been reviewed and changed to have a 0.3 protection of bash, cut, and ballistic. This is a huge change that is going to affect you a lot in the early game. Previously, it was pretty easy to throw on multiple layers of basic clothing and get not good protection, but some protection. Every point of damage that was mitigated by this makes it a little easier for you to go out and sustain your looting, your fighting, things like that. Now, you will be getting overall significantly less protection in the early game. Some numbers have been severely reduced. So like I said, the panties have not been addressed yet. God, saying panties makes me uncomfortable. I don't know. I guess I'm a prude. So these have not been changed yet. So there's still 1, but our brassiere, for instance, has been changed. And you can see it only affords you 0.1 protection, whereas previously it was 1 full point of protection. So that's 1/10 of what it previously afforded you. If we look at something simple, let's, do I have a t-shirt? I have a work t-shirt, which has 0.2 protection. And we'll just have a look at some of the items here. Let's look at, yes, I don't care about achievements. Let's look at our t-shirts here. So if you wear a t-shirt now, it is 0.2 protection. I thought maybe the work t-shirt was more protection. If we look at something, let's say jeans, for instance, just basic jeans, afford half of the protection that they used to give you. Things like that. Let's have a look at the hoodie. The hoodie used to be one of my favorites. Looks like that has not been addressed yet, so it is just 1. Actually, that may have been changed because I believe previously a hoodie, because of its thickness, actually gave you 2 or 3 points of protection. So that may have been addressed, but a hoodie obviously is thicker clothing than something like a t-shirt. But anyway, this is going to have an impact on your early game because the protection that you would normally get, even if it was just 2, 3, 4 points of extra protection, that stuff together actually added up and over time would resist a significant amount of damage. That would enable you to continue being the kind of rampant, murderous survivor that you are. Whereas now you're going to probably find, honestly, you probably won't even notice it that much. But over time, it's going to have a cumulative effect of your character taking more and more damage. So there are a lot of items that have not been addressed yet, like the underpants that I pointed out here. To my understanding, I was talking to Esotericist about it a little bit on Discord yesterday. I believe that's who I was talking to. I'm very forgetful when it comes to people's names, things like that. And they basically said that this was not supposed to be merged yet because Kevin had a lot more stuff he wanted to do with this. So in the future, I'm guessing one of the major things that's going to take place, a lot of these items are going to need audited because it's not like an automatic change. It's something that's going to have to be changed on an item by item basis, which you can think of that like when we got item length for various items in the game. It took a long time for people to really process and work through all those items and assign them the appropriate lengths. We'll probably see that with clothing as well. This also, I brought up specifically the motorcycle armor. So previously the motorcycle armor was partially cotton. Is it the armor or is it the pants I had a problem with? I think it was the pants. 3, 6, and 9. So we have a protection here of 3, 6, and 9, despite the fact that this is Kevlar. So you would expect motorcycle pants. Specifically, motorcycle gear is designed so that if you were to fall off of a bike and skid across the asphalt, it would do everything in its power to protect you from road rash, basically. That's why bikers wear a lot of leather, things like that. So you would expect a pair of, a set of clothing that was designed specifically to resist that kind of abrasive and the damage that would cause would have higher protection values, but it's actually worse in a lot of ways than certain leather gear. And that's because it's partially cotton. So previously, these values were a product explicitly of thickness and the material. However, moving forward, they did say that, items that are specifically designed to be armor, like the motorcycle pants and armor, things like that, will likely have better values compared to like normal cotton clothing and things like that, if that even makes sense. So I think there's a lot of work ahead that's going to address a lot of the inconsistencies and the issues that we've seen with armor. And I do think overall this is a good change. I do think that making this a decimal rather than a whole number does allow for more versatility in armor items and will allow us to differentiate different types of armor's qualities based on those numbers. But I also do think that in the early game, you are going to take more damage over time, and you may not even realize it until you start noticing, oh man, I'm really getting hurt a lot. So that's my take. There is room for improvement. It's going to be expanded on. Kevin has a second PR already that's going to address a lot more of this stuff. But I wanted to shout it out because, one, it's very visible and it's a kind of a core mechanic. The protection values are something that's very core to Cataclysm. But I do ultimately think this is a good change. And I think people just need to be a little patient because I do think there will be inconsistency for probably several weeks or months until they can sort through all of the armor items specifically. And that's not to downplay what Kevin has done. He's addressed a lot of things. But I do think there's more work that's going to get done, and it might take a little while for that to shake out. So that's the change. Let's move on to the next one. And then finally today from Pepacito1122, we have tire irons. So if you played Cataclysm for any length of time, you know that a wrench is pretty much crucial to doing any kind of significant vehicle work. Specifically, you couldn't even change a tire without finding a wrench, which has always been kind of silly. One, it's a gatekeeping tool that prevents you from doing work, which I think is almost always bad when you have to find a specific item and you're reliant on RNG to do so. But also because it's just not realistic. A wrench is not the ideal tool for changing a tire. I have never used I'm pretty sure the wrench in the game is meant to be like an adjustable wrench. Never used one of those to change a tire, but I bet it's miserable. And so this person has added tire irons to the game, as well as adding a wheel fastening quality. So if you have a wrench, you can still undo tires because a wrench now has wheel fastening quality. But you can also, if you just, find a vehicle that needs a tire change, tire irons will suffice for that. And they don't exist for any other purpose. They can't be used for bolt turning as far as I know. It just is the wheel fastening ability. And hopefully this will lead to more people being able to do more vehicle work earlier in the game. It makes sense from a realism perspective, as well as the fact that tire irons in general are something that almost every person has in their car. I have 2 in my car, in fact. And I think that vehicles and their contents have been a little neglected in Cataclysm. I do think someone should go through and add simple things that appear in most people's cars, like a jack in basically, maybe not every car, but in most vehicles. Tire irons in most vehicles, maybe more frequent jumper cables spare tires, things like that. So I'm really hoping that as we progress, I don't know if they really added them to a ton of item groups or adjusted the actual spawn frequency of these items in vehicles, like explicitly altering the item groups in vehicles to make them more frequent. But the fact that they were added to the game at all is very, very good. And hopefully that will lead to finding more of these in the future and make vehicle work a little bit more accessible. You know, when I started playing Cataclysm, I remember being so frustrated because you could not pull off your tires. You know, every vehicle in Cataclysm, it seems like, has all 4 tires blown out. And one of the major hurdles to getting a working vehicle is finding one that has tires. And I remember starting this game up 3-4 years ago and being so frustrated that I couldn't even change the damn tire on a vehicle without finding a wrench, which at the time, you know, item spawns were much worse back then. It was a lot harder to find a wrench back in those days. And yeah, I distinctly remember being very frustrated as a new player by that. So I love that this was added. This is something that has been discussed many times on Discord about whether or not, not even whether or not it needs done, but who would do it, when it would happen, and really how it would look in the end. And they went with a new tool quality, which will now appear on tire irons as well as wrenches. Now, for the record, it does not apply to pliers. You still can't use a pliers to change a tire, which I think makes perfect sense. But yeah, this is a really, really good change, and I was really happy to see this on the change logs in the last couple of weeks. So, yeah, everybody, I think that's it for this episode. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully it was good stuff. And I'll be back, of course, in the next couple of weeks with another episode of the Experimental Cataclysm. Until then, everyone stay well, be healthy, take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next episode.